So, welcome everybody. My name is Kat Luckock. I'm the founder of Share Impact, Impact Strategist and Business Coach for Social Entrepreneurs, and the host of the WSES Social Enterprise Summit. It's brilliant to have you here, whether you're watching live or on the replay. And today, my special guest is Lucy Findlay, Chief Executive of the Social Enterprise Mark CIC. So, welcome, Lucy. It's fantastic to have you.
Brilliant. I'm really pleased to be here too.
No, it's really, really great to have you. We've had some great guests over the last few days, so anybody that's watching who hasn't watched any of the replays, you'll be getting emails and stuff, so do check out the replays from previous in the week if you haven't managed to watch any of the webinars. But today we're talking to Lucy all about accreditation and governance and why that's important for social enterprises. So Lucy, I'm going to let you kick off and kind of introduce yourself and also the Social Enterprise Mark and essentially what it does, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper and talk about some different things around that as well.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. It's been quite a heavy week. I was just explaining to Kat, I've been up in Dundee for most of the week. I'm now back down in Devon, where I was hoping it was going to be sunnier, but it's now pouring with rain as usual. Mm-hmm. So yes, the Social Enterprise Mark is an accreditation essentially for social enterprises. And the reason we originally set it up was because social enterprises had issues with how they marketed themselves, essentially. People understood they thought they understood what charity was, which is often seen to be about volunteering and delivering things for free. And then at the other end, there's business, which is seen as, making lots of money for shareholders. And there wasn't really an understanding from the wider world, not just the general public, but just generally about what social enterprise is. So the reason we set up the Social Enterprise Mark was to try and articulate and put some authentication around that space. And I think that's particularly important in a world where we're increasingly seeing things like fake news. When I was in Dundee, it was actually a conference about the future of universities, and they were talking a bit about Generation Z. Mm-hmm. And apparently Generation Z are very much looking for authentication because they see as they're growing up, increasingly they understand that the world isn't as straightforward as perhaps it has been seen to be. When I was a kid, if something came in the local newspaper, it was kind of seen as gospel truth. But now I think that, there is a fair degree of skepticism about what business is really about. And also there's been quite a lot of research recently about how the next generation that are going through university are actually becoming quite cynical about business and what business actually does. So with the Social Enterprise Mark, we're essentially an accreditation for those organisations that want to prove their social enterprise credentials. So that drills down into things like their governance structure, how they are contracting or gaining their income. So they have to be primarily business focused, but obviously the majority of the profit that they earn has to be going back into that good cause. And there needs to be a good cause to start off with. And also to try and show how they're making a difference, otherwise known as social impact / social value. So essentially that's really what the Social Enterprise Mark does. We also have a couple of other products. The Social Enterprise Gold Mark, which is for those organisations that are wanting to show excellence. So that drills down into other aspects of what a social enterprise, a good social enterprise does around stakeholder engagement, how they treat their staff, how they are an ethical business, and how they create social and financial impact. So those are our two key products, and we're also developing a new product at the moment with DWP for organisations that are primarily, their main role is to employ disabled people. That's hopefully going to be tested out in the autumn, and I'm going to talk at the BASE conference for those types of businesses it's next week now, in Milton Keynes. So we're developing new products, and I think, kind of that's really where our niche has been, around that certification, accreditation, whatever you want to call it, to ensure that business is doing authentically what it says on the tin.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my understanding is, Lucy, that the social enterprise mark is a global mark as well. It's a global accreditation. It's not just.
It is, yes.
And it's come out of the UK context. You certainly have social enterprises that you accredit internationally, haven't you?
That's absolutely right. I mean, that we knew we wanted to be UK wide, and fairly early on we were approached to test the social enterprise mark out in an international context. An organisation called C3 in Dubai, and the challenge that they really have in somewhere like Dubai is that there is no equivalent of Companies House or the CIC regulator or the Charity Commission. So I think, in the words of their director, it's like the Wild West or the Wild East, whichever one you want to call it. So any organisation can just set up and say they're doing something. So having a UK accreditation was actually an important thing for them, and we tested that out, because obviously our systems and practices were set up around a UK accreditation. So that was quite an adventure, taking it through our certification panel, because behind our accreditation, importantly, there sits a certification panel that checks what we do. And also, if there's new custom and practice, helps us develop, if you like, the sort of case law around that. So what we have to do is we have to perform other due diligence tests in an international context. But we're now in 11 different countries across the world. And I think it's mainly because of that factor. It's about something that perhaps they don't have in their own local area, or there's a reason why they particularly want to show their credibility. So, for instance, FlowCert, which is the certification company for fair trade, holds the social enterprise mark. And the reason for them was that people have a certain image of fair trade, and a lot of it is about, it's all about the farmers, and why do I have to pay for accreditation? But actually, the business model is you pay for accreditation, and that is then the profits from that are reinvested into the Fair Trade Foundation and the good work that they do in terms of their profile raising and their campaigning on behalf of the farmers and their networks. So there are, there's sort of various different reasons why those organisations have wanted the UK-based social enterprise mark. But we've also done work in other countries where they have said that they are interested in setting up their own social enterprise accreditation. So we worked with a Russian foundation to set up their own equivalent. And also we worked with the British Council in China. And I was at the Social Enterprise World Forum a couple of months ago, and we came across there's another accreditation in Hong Kong, which has very much used our model to develop a social enterprise accreditation there, and we're looking to develop more links. So it's quite exciting, really. You know, there's a bit of a critical mass, really, in terms internationally of thinking about, you know, how do we show that we're really doing what we do. And there may be differences in interpretation of what social enterprise is, but at the end of the day, everyone is clear that there needs to be something that shows that those businesses are actually doing it, rather than just talking about it and saying that they're doing it.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point I suppose to ask about next, because we've talked about this a lot with other guests previously in the week about, you know, what is the definition of social enterprise? And for me, it's, you know, I don't think we necessarily need to have that definition. I think it's great that when we're talking to Erin Shanahan from the World Fair Trade Organization about this, there's great diversity in the sector.
Yeah.
And I think that's really positive, because we are at the very early stages, although there's been social enterprises around, certainly in the UK, for 100 plus years in some cases. We're still very much at the very early stages of developing different structures, different government structures, different ways of doing business differently. And I think that's positive, and I think we don't want to restrict it too much. But I'm interested in terms of your accreditation process. How do you decide whether you accredit an organisation or not, and whether it is or not a social enterprise, even though you probably still keep that broad perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I take what you say. I think one of the issues really with saying that it's a completely broad church is that it can be quite confusing for people.
Yeah.
Especially when they're setting up. So, for instance, I came across a social entrepreneur, and she said, well, if I'd known about what a social enterprise actually was, I would have set one up. It was, she just set up a company that does some good stuff.
Yeah.
But essentially, I mean, you know, I'm not decrying that as being a bad business model, but it's not a social enterprise, because for me, the primary motivation for a social enterprise has to be that you are trying to make a difference, and that the majority of any income or profits that you're making is going towards that. Otherwise, it's not the primary function of that company, and that's where I think social enterprises differ. So for things like B Corp, I think it's a great development, because we want more businesses to be thinking more socially.
Yeah.
And if B Corp is going to make businesses and corporates do more social impact, then that's great. But the raison d'etre for a social enterprise is that you are there primarily for a social purpose, and that is it's like the stick of rock, if you like, that runs through everything that you do. And that's why I actually think that the asset lock is quite an important thing.
Yeah.
Because it determines why you are what you are and who actually controls the company. And you may have a set of directors that think the same as you, but if you don't have that in your constitution, there's nothing to say that somebody couldn't come in and change it. So we don't require an asset lock, but we do require that the organisation is constituted in a way that restricts the amount of money that a shareholder can take out of the company.
Yeah.
Some people might be critical of that in terms of, well, that doesn't allow for equity finance. But equity finance does lead to certain behaviours. So that's really why we look for things like an asset lock and a strong social mission, and that the organisation is actually doing what it says on the tin. Now, the other area that is controversial is around income generation. So we require that the organisation has at least 50% of their income coming from trading. But we are quite flexible with that. So trading can include contracts, and if an organisation has had a big capital grant, for example, that might distort the balance sheet. So that is obviously taken into account. So nothing is, if there is a case to be made, then we can make that to our certification panel, and they have done that. So, for instance, if there was a cooperative that was set up, and I know there are a number of cooperatives that are set up for the delivery of social care, and the mission and the owners of that cooperative were people that were being paid poor sums of money, because care tends to be very badly paid. The fact that they have a mission to improve the terms and conditions of care workers is actually a social mission. So I wouldn't have a problem with the distribution of profits to those organisations. It's looking at what the organisation is actually doing and what it's doing, are its behaviours linked to its social mission, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And having that flexible approach to the core values that you set as what the accreditation is about and what social enterprise is about.
Yes. And I think some of those percentages might differ in different countries, and there might be a different emphasis in different countries. So, for instance, I've talked about social enterprise in Africa, and one of the challenges there is corruption. Mm-hmm. So it's more about looking at who the shareholders are and kind of actually digging a bit around how, what the behaviours are in terms of extraction of monies out of the company. So the asset lock actually is a really important thing, would be a really important thing for them. Because, the way that the government has set up grant schemes has led to particular behaviours. So, I think there will always be a nuance depending on, that particular country's issues.
Lucy, can you, just for those people that maybe haven't heard the term asset lock, particularly if they're not in the UK and in the sector, can you just define what you mean by asset lock?
It can be quite confusing because it's an all-in capturing term. So for a community interest company, an asset lock has two aspects. One is the distribution of profits to shareholders, so it limits the amount that can be distributed. And for a CIC that is limited by shares, only 35% of the profits can be distributed. We allow actually more than that in the social enterprise mark. But having said that, we haven't come across many that sit in between. And then the other aspect to it is when the company closes down. So when a company or a CIC or a charity, in fact, closes down, they have to put all of the assets of that organisation it has to be transferred to another, like a similar type of organisation, depending on what the constitution says. That might be another CIC, or it might be, in the case of a charity, I think it has to be another charity. So it's providing a level of assurance for any organisation that invests or gives a grant to that company, that it will not eventually, end up in the hands of individuals that run that organisation, or are members of that organisation, or are shareholders of that organisation.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Because I just think we have such a diverse range of people on the summit.
Yeah, I know, and it's quite off-putting, some of this terminology, and it's something I've had to get my head around. I have to say, I'm not a legal whiz. When I saw that I was talking about legal structures and stuff, I was like, perhaps you should have been talking to Richard, our assessor, because I have a broad knowledge of it, but I don't have the in-depth. I'm not a solicitor.
No, but it's knowing enough, isn't it? More than other people, that when they are still just starting out. So you mentioned there, so in the UK we have various different structures. We have the CIC, registered with Companies House.
Yeah.
If a social enterprise in the UK, for example, is registered as a CIC with Companies House, what's the added benefits of also getting accreditation with someone like, something like the social enterprise mark?
Right. Well, all that I suppose essentially a CIC is a legal structure. So we are not just a legal structure, and we're bringing together all of those like-minded organisations. So it's not just about a certain type of social enterprise. So it's a wider breadth of approach. But essentially, our assessment over the years has actually got more in depth. And if you apply to the CIC, you have to fill in a form every year to say what your community impact is. But those are only spot checked. We check all of our community impact and community value statements, and we help organisations to fill them out. So they get an intensive process whereby we are actually helping them through all of that, and we check everything every year in terms of the legal structures as well. Whereas the regulator doesn't have the resources. They've got thousands of CICs now, so they don't have the resources to do that. So we provide a level of assurance that's over and above that, but also we have a stronger campaigning and promotional role, which the regulator doesn't have. I think they used to have more of a role around all of that, but resources have been cut. So we are promoting that organisation on the basis of their social enterprise. And we have in our directory, if you go into our directory, every single mark holder has to have a social impact statement, and that sits there underneath the social enterprise mark. And that is really useful information because it can be used for things like annual reports, reporting back to the board, and for very small organisations, it's actually something that perhaps they find really difficult to do. So we provide a service that helps them to do that. So really, we're not a regulator, because obviously it's a voluntary scheme. But what we provide is the added value on top of that of the sort of the campaigning and the promotional element, as well as helping the organisation articulate its social impact and proving that as well. So it's we are actively checking, and we have thrown out social enterprises that do not fulfill those requirements. So we're quite active in checking all of that information.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, and I think that is, that particular, being part of the wider community of people, not just in the UK, but internationally, supporting one another, promoting the mark as well. But particularly that support you provide. I know that lots of social enterprises really struggle with that kind of, what is our social impact? How do we measure it? How do we define it? And I think that support's really important and needed. Lucy, I know when we've talked previously, some of your members are universities as well. And I know we've talked about this before, because I've never really thought about a university as a social enterprise, but it's really interesting, I think, now, particularly universities in the UK, who are thinking much more about students as their customers, and also the added value that they provide to the public and society through their various activities, means that some of them do actually fall into that category. So Can you tell us a little bit more about why you are working with universities, why they get accredited, and the kind of some examples of the things that do social impact?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we got involved with universities was that universities themselves, vice chancellors, were going out and saying, we think we're social enterprises. So that was the start of it, really. And we thought that if they were, then we should maybe challenge that. And if they were, then they should be accredited.
Yeah.
And we could see huge benefits if they did qualify in terms of how they articulated themselves and how they worked with students and Generation Z, or whichever generation it is we're at now, in promoting social enterprise and embedding social enterprise into what they did, not only in their way of teaching, because quite a lot of universities are now teaching about social enterprise, but in their way of acting in the local community. So, for instance, Plymouth College of Art is a very big participant in local regeneration schemes. So they use some of the profits that they make from being a university to reinvest into the development of the creative arts school in a very deprived area of Plymouth, where you wouldn't expect those pupils in that area to be exposed to the creative industries. And there's a direct link between the university there and the school. So some of the staff from the school go down and speak at the school, teach at the school, talk to the students, and then there's a relationship between that and then them going on into higher education, because obviously if you have a degree, you're more likely to improve your social standing, your income, your health. So it's a very it's a kind of a perfect cycle, really, and it's how social enterprises behave. So in terms of why universities are social enterprises, they are de facto charities, so they're not making profits for shareholders. They are making most of their income is now coming from student fees, and that's another issue for them, because obviously universities get quite a lot of bad press. I don't really know why, because actually universities are doing a very good job under quite difficult conditions, but there's obviously the press has got hold of this idea that, you know, everyone's charging £9,000 and what's happening to our £9,000, but actually that £9,000 is being used to reinvest back into education and the way in which that university operates as a social enterprise and supports the local community. So it's no different, really, in terms of the way that a social enterprise operates. And some of the big charities, it's on a similar sort of scale. So that's really why I think it's important that universities are brought into the fold. They're natural partners. They actually hold the same values as us. They're working in the local communities, and they're acting in the same way as, you know, other social enterprises that are large and working for the regeneration of their local community.
Brilliant. No, and I think that's really interesting that universities, see themselves in that way, and are looking for that kind of accreditation. I'm interested to go back a little bit in terms of looking at organisations, social enterprises that have this accreditation. are they, or I'm assuming one of the reasons as well, and as it grows as a mark and as more people internationally recognise, both businesses and consumers recognise what social enterprise is and are looking for that kind of mark to say, yeah, these have actually been rigorously tested by somebody, to say that they kind of fit a certain criteria, is the hope that the mark helps organisations like trade internationally as well as domestically, in that, you know, there's that recognition that actually they stand for something that you've kind of set.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, obviously with Brexit, that's a really important thing, that they will. I think that we can only achieve that really through partnering with other organisations internationally. We can't do it on our own, you know, we're 6 people. So actually bringing in the universities into that equation is another important aspect, because obviously they've got an incredible international presence. Most of them have international campuses, and they're working, you know, with other universities internationally to partner with them to deliver their courses. So I would see that we need to make the whole thing bigger, and we need to use our partners and our and develop more links with those, maybe including those that are already setting up their own social enterprise marks. So Finland, for example, has got their own social enterprise mark. I've already mentioned that Hong Kong has as well, and then there's another one in Australia, which interestingly is called a social traders mark. It's run by social traders, and it does actually match up products and services, but it's only really linked to a certain part of Australia. So I think it does, but we will need to expand through partners our operation, and we haven't got to lose kind of our focus as well, which is, you know, about kind of ensuring that we can deliver what we can deliver within our resources and our capacity. And at the minute, we're quite stretched with the development work that we're doing with DWP as well. So it's an aspiration, but I think we can only achieve that with other partners.
Brilliant, yeah, no, surely. And I'm interested then, can we explore the DWP project a little bit more, because I think it's really interesting what you're developing there in terms of the employment side, and recognising that lots of social enterprises focus on that kind of recruitment, employment of people that are maybe further from the job market. Yes.
Yeah. So there's 2 things really. There is some people might be familiar with in the UK anyway. I don't know if your audience is broader than the UK, but within the UK there used to be something called the 2 ticks scheme, which was for businesses. I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but it was about, you know, being good at employing disabled people with disabilities. And the government changed that to disability confident, and there's 3 levels of disability confident that are run for generic businesses to try and get them to think more broadly about how they recruit and how they support their workforce in terms of disabilities. So you can go on the website, and I would encourage everyone to at least sign up for Disability Confidence Level 1, which is about being committed to try and increase the number of people that are to increase people with disabilities into your employees. this is the accreditation that we're developing is a level further than that, and it might be something that some of the social enterprises listening would be interested in, which is about organisations that are primarily set up to employ disabled people. So some people might remember Remploy, which was government owned and the government closed it down. So basically at the moment there's about 50 organisations that receive a contract through DWP to help them employ disabled people. Essentially acts, sort of as a way of helping to address some of the extra costs that are involved with employing disabled people. But that's all about to change, and the government wants to open it out to other social enterprises above these 50 organisations. But they need a means of guaranteeing that those organisations are social enterprise, well, they are led by disability employment, and that they are what they do, what they are on the tin. They are good employers of people with disabilities, and also fundamentally for us, we think that they should be social enterprises, and DWP is very interested in expanding employment and support for people with disabilities within social enterprises. So it will open the doors to other organisations. So at the moment, we're going to be developing a proof of concept of all of this in September, and a number of the existing providers of this service will be testing using the mark and the new social enterprise disability employment mark, and working with DWP to deliver under the new contractual arrangements. But also there will be a number of new organisations who will be able to be part of the trial period. But the idea is that it will all be opened up in April 2020, I think it is, for all organisations to be applying for that if they are employing enough disabled people. Fantastic. So it's what one of the challenges for us, I think, has been that the social enterprise mark has been very much a voluntary scheme. And people who really believe that they want to show their credentials, obviously they'll sign up for it. But there's the added aspect of this particular development that the government has backed it. So, it's kind of, well, you need to have the mark as well as it being a good thing. So it will be quite exciting, I think, to have linked into a department and actually shown that despite what a lot of commissioners say about, we can't favour social enterprises, there are ways that the government can do it. So it will be quite a test case, I think, and could lead to some different behaviours in the wider social enterprise world, where commissioners will be looking at this and saying, well, actually, could we do something similar to sort of promote social enterprises as a preferred option? Yeah, no, definitely. Wouldn't we all like to see more of that? Definitely. Yes. Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to ask that everybody that's watching live, if you've got any questions, now is the time to post those in the chat box so we can ask Lucy those questions. I'm wondering, Lucy, whether, because you work across the sector and you see different things as well internationally, what kind of trends and opportunities do you see for social enterprises over the next few years you think they maybe need to look out for? I think that international angle has to be one to be looking at. we don't know what's going to be happening with European funding. And I went to an event recently where there was someone from the government actually sitting in the room, and they were talking, well, what's going to happen to the structural funds? And the person from government couldn't even give us any clue. So that's slightly worrying, I think, about what's going to happen. So it's really, I think, about trying, like any business, it's about broadening the risk base and reaching out to other organisations. I know that the social enterprise sector has traditionally, certainly in the last 15 years, gone on about, delivering government contracts, but we know, I mean, even in the commercial sector, commercial companies are pulling out of delivery of public services. So I suppose there might be opportunities there for social enterprises that don't need such a huge margin to apply for them. But as we know, there are challenges around all of that, and the government is more driven by price, even though they say they want to be driven by social value. So there has to be more spreading of risk away from government contracts, I think, or certainly just big government contracts, and looking more broadly at what the focus of the business is and what the strategy is going forward. We've seen a number of social enterprises that were reliant on spin-outs, for example, reliant on those big contracts, and where they haven't diversified, and when the new contracts come in, they found actually it's not competitive. They can't make profit. Businesses have to, obviously balance the books. The government doesn't. So I think what we might see is more services going back into government purely because there isn't enough fat. And I think generally there's a feeling that the sort of outsourcing of services has been a bit overinflated in terms of what the benefits are. But having said that, what I think social enterprises bring is the niche. It's finding where there are things that the market won't deliver. So it's finding ways in which that can be resourced and maybe working with other partners to do that. And I think that's something which we should see, well, I would say, is something that needs to be explored more in the longer term. Another thing that was flagged up, I was at a seminar earlier on this week about the future footprint of social enterprise for the European Union, actually, which is a bit ironic because it was about the UK model, is where the finance for social enterprise is going. And I think there's an increasing recognition that the approach of social investment has been too led by the needs of the investors rather than what the needs are of social enterprises. So I think that there will be a change around, and it started to happen around all of that, to say, well, what are the actual needs of social enterprises? And we should design products that fit that rather than trying to fit the social enterprises into that particular model. Because what we've seen is that the social enterprises that have got social investment tend to be some of the bigger ones that are set up, and it's the same people getting the same money. So in order to broaden the deal base, that all needs to be considered.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's, it will really depend, depending on what type of social enterprise you are, because here in the UK we have a lot of social enterprises that are in that service-based business that are providing public services in essence, or are reliant on public sector contracts, which are probably going to be hit quite hard in terms of the changes that are happening over the next few months. But then there's also a huge wealth of great product-based businesses that don't operate in that space at all, who are working directly with consumers or B2B, And although the B2B market might change slightly, but I think the consumer market, as long as the economy stays afloat, will be all right.
Yeah.
There's huge opportunities there as well, I think, to think about how you're expanding your product basis or reaching out to more international audiences. And the great thing with e-commerce is that's increasingly possible.
Yeah. But it's also thinking about, because services isn't just the local authority, you know. And so, for instance, I was talking earlier on in this week about Northampton, where the council is bankrupt, and the university's actually coming in and filling part of that gap. So, you know, it's about maybe working more effectively with your local university and thinking more broadly. It's not just about local government commissioning, it's about broadening your partner base in the locality.
No, absolutely. It's really, really important. So I don't think we've got any other questions from the floor. Is there anything else, Lucy, you want to share about anything that's coming up for the Social Enterprise Mark, or things we should be looking out for?
Well, I think probably it's probably some of the challenges that Erinch, I didn't hear, unfortunately, because I was in Dundee doing my own speech, but it's some of the challenges that were mentioned at our conference. It's about how we really ramp up social enterprise to be a solution and not be seen as a niche. So many people kind of think, oh, you know, it's the kind of the hippie thing or the hipster thing. But actually, social enterprise is a business and it can operate in any environment. It's just about the motivations of that organisation. And I think there needs to be much more partnership working and collaboration rather than trying to compete, to try and say we're not, the current economy is not spreading the wealth. We've still got 80% of the world's wealth being owned by the richest 1%. That's only getting worse. How can we fundamentally change the way that we operate? And I was listening at the conference that I was at. It was on regional development, and I thought, you know, some of the stuff that was being said by things like the Chamber of Commerce and the local authority is stuff that was the same 20 years ago. Yeah. And it's kind of, we've got to kind of change, I think, to think of things differently. And it's like, well, who's actually going to lead that? It does require leadership. So I suppose that's my plea. It's just like we need more people saying this and moving forwards and saying we need new solutions because the old solutions aren't working, and we can't. You know, the world that we're moving into is a very different world than it was even 5 years ago. So we've got to start thinking differently. There's huge technological challenges and different ways that business is operating, and social enterprise needs to get on board with that and, you know, get, you know, IT literate, start to promote themselves in different ways and be relevant to the to part of the solution to how we create a better world.
No, absolutely, completely agree with that, and that's definitely resonated with a lot of the comments of the guests previously in the week as well. And you know, I remember at the Social Enterprise World Forum that message of just, I was thinking bigger, bolder, you know, what that we're trying to create collectively, and not just feeling like we're very, you know, individual businesses isolated in this little journey that we're on, you know, to tackle this individual problem with a solution that we've created, but actually feeling part of a movement essentially that's transforming the way we run businesses, transforming the way we deliver change in societies and with the environment as well. There is a question from Kimberly, so thanks very much, Kimberly. She says it relates to the trends question earlier. What do you see the social enterprise sector looking like in the next 5 years?
Looking like?
What would you like it to be like?
What would I like it to be like? Well, I think it's quite a difficult question because the social enterprises vary so much, and that's one of the problems we have at the social enterprise mark, because we have businesses that are working in all different industries, with all different ownership structures and all different motivations. But what I would like to see is, in the next 5 years, is social enterprises being better at articulating their social value and promoting that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, being more commercially aware. And one of the challenges we've had is where you try and buy from a social enterprise and then you don't get any response. And it's like, come on, guys, you know, people don't automatically think, oh, I'm going to buy from this because it does good things. You also have to provide a good service.
Yeah.
So it's about being better at being commercial and better at showing your difference and how, you know, what difference you're making. And I would apply that to myself as well and to the social enterprise mark. I think sometimes, especially as a, you know, a level above the front line, it can be quite hard to articulate how we make a difference.
And I think that, oh, sorry, go on, Lucy.
Sorry?
No, you carry on.
I've finished really.
Okay.
I think those are the two things that I'd like to see social enterprises become more of in 5 years, given the whole breadth of different types of social enterprises that are out there.
No, I think that's really essential, and I think, I can't remember who it was earlier in the week, but somebody was saying, you know, not just operating in this kind of bubble of the social enterprise sector, but getting out there and meeting and engaging with different businesses, different industries, different government sectors, you know, engaging more with your customers at the end of the day as well. That will help you become more commercially aware, will help you focus in on, because I think often, and I've been at fault of doing this as well, when you're a social entrepreneur who's so passionate about the cause that you're working towards, you can forget about that commercial side, which at the end of the day is going to enable you to deliver that impact. And I think it's the one thing we have to stay focused as leaders of those social enterprises, that we won't build this viable infrastructure of a sector if we're not commercially viable.
Yeah.
It's really, really key.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you said that. Lucy, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you very much for all your insights and expertise. It's brilliant. I wish you all the best of luck with all your new products that you're bringing on board, and kind of just generally with the social enterprise mark. We'll be sharing details of the website and the things that you've mentioned throughout this webinar in a kind of resource that we're sending out at the end of the series, the summit as well. But yeah, it's been brilliant. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, that's great. I've just realised I can actually see everybody's chat on the side there. So yeah, hello to everybody. Hello to Kimberly. Anyway, I can see Kimberly's questions and South Africa.
Yeah, and Africa's from South Africa. So
yeah, brilliant.
So yeah, thanks very much, and we'll speak again soon.
Okay, lovely.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.